Hey guys, tonight we are trading our soft pillows and quiet rooms for the cold, hard reality of a medieval monastery. Picture it. The only light is a single, sputtering tallow candle, casting long, dancing shadows across damp stone walls. The air is thick with the smell of beeswax, old parchment, and a faint, ever-present hint of mildew. You can forget your memory foam mattress. Your new bed is a straw-filled sack on a wooden plank, and the only blanket you have is a coarse, scratchy wool robe that does little to fight off the bone-deep chill. Spoiler alert, the life expectancy for you in this scenario is not great. Most people today, with our love for creature comforts and a full 8 hours of sleep, probably wouldn't last a week. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know where you're watching from and what time it is for you down in the comments. I always love seeing how far these stories travel. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. It doesn't begin with a logical decision. There's no pros and cons list, no career fair, no thoughtful discussion with a guidance counselor over a warm cup of mead. For you, it begins as a feeling, a deep, resonant hum beneath the surface of your everyday life. You're a second son, perhaps, or maybe a third. Your older brother will inherit the small plot of land your family has worked for generations, a muddy, thankless strip of earth governed by the rhythm of the seasons and the whims of a local lord you've never even met. Your future is supposed to be simple. You'll help your brother, marry a girl from the next village over, and raise your own sons to do the same. It is a life of continuity, of predictability. But lately, that predictability has started to feel like a cage. The taste of the coarse, dark bread at dinner is bland. The familiar weight of the hoe in your hands feels alien. The laughter of the other villagers as they gather around the fire in the evening sounds distant, as if coming from another world. A profound sense of dislocation has settled over you. While everyone else is worried about the harvest, the price of salt, or a sick cow, your mind is snagged on something vast and terrifyingly abstract, eternity. The thought of your soul, of God, of the infinitesimal speck of your existence in the grand, divine cosmic plan, has become an obsession. It's like a song stuck in your head, except instead of a catchy tavern tune, it's the unsettling, silent roar of the infinite. This nagging unease has a name, though you might not know it. The Desert Fathers called it Astia, the noonday demon. It's a kind of spiritual listlessness, a deep weariness with the world that saps all joy and meaning from your life. It's not simple laziness. It's a form of despair that makes the entire temporal world seem like a faded, pointless tapestry. You look at your calloused hands, the dirt permanently etched into the lines of your palms, and you don't see a life of honest labor. You see meaningless toil that will end in a shallow, unmarked grave. Your family starts to notice the change. You are quiet, withdrawn. You stare into the fire for hours, your food growing cold on its wooden plate. They worry. They think you're lovesick, or perhaps even enchanted, cursed by some old woman in the woods. Your mother offers you a special herbal tea. Your father claps you on the back a little too hard and tells you to find a girl and get on with it. Breaking the news to them is the medieval equivalent of telling your parents you're dropping out of college to become a social media influencer, except your new content house is a freezing stone abbey with a strict no-talking policy and zero Wi-Fi. When you finally try to explain it, the words come out clumsy and strange. You speak of a hollowness that only God can fill, a calling to a life of prayer and contemplation. They don't understand. To them, the monastery is a place for the pious, the scholarly, or for the children of nobility who have no other inheritance. And it's true that many who enter the monastery aren't there by choice. It's a well-known historical fact that for centuries, wealthy families have practiced oblation, donating a young child, often as young as 7, to the church along with a sizable endowment. These children, known as oblates, grow up knowing nothing but the cloistered life. But your path is different. You are a grown adult, making a conscious, terrifying choice to sever yourself from the world. Historians still argue whether these late vocations, as they were called, were genuine mystical experiences, a psychological response to the era's pervasive brutality and high mortality rates, or simply the most socially acceptable escape route for a sensitive soul who just couldn't stomach the thought of being a pig herder for the next 40 years. Honestly, the pigs probably have a better benefits package. The feeling intensifies until it's a physical ache in your chest. The world becomes a two-dimensional painting, and you have caught a glimpse of the three-dimensional reality behind it. One day, you can't bear it any longer. You seek out the local priest, a man whose own faith seems more a matter of habit than passion. You confess your turmoil, your sense of suffocating meaninglessness. He listens, stroking his chin, and for the first time, you see a flicker of understanding in his eyes. He tells you of the Benedictine Abbey, a day's journey from your village, a place where men dedicate their entire existence to the Opus Dei, the work of God. That night, you don't sleep. You lie on your straw pallet, listening to the familiar sounds of your sleeping family, and you feel an overwhelming sense of both grief and liberation. Before the sun rises, you are gone. You leave with nothing but the clothes on your back and a small pouch of bread. As you walk, the world seems sharper, more vibrant. The dawn chorus of the birds is a choir, the rustle of the wind in the trees a divine whisper. Every step is a confirmation. You are not running away from your life. You are running towards the only one that has ever made sense. As the imposing stone gatehouse of the monastery comes into view, you don't feel fear. You feel like you're finally coming home. You raise a hesitant hand and knock on the heavy oak door of the gatehouse. The sound is swallowed by the thick wood, and for a long moment, nothing happens. You're about to knock again, feeling foolish and exposed, when a small grill slides open at eye level. Two ancient, suspicious eyes peer out at you. This is the porter, an elderly monk whose sacred duty, as prescribed by the rule of Saint Benedict, is to be the first point of contact with the outside world. He's the monastery's doorman, bouncer, and receptionist all rolled into one, and his expression makes it clear he's seen it all before. You state your purpose in a voice that cracks with nerves. You wish to leave the world and serve God. The old monk's face remains impassive. He's heard it from runaway farm hands, disgraced nobles, and genuine seekers. To him, you are all the same until proven otherwise. Without a word, the grill snaps shut. You are left standing outside, a test of patience that is your first, unofficial lesson in monastic life. It might be minutes or it might be hours, but eventually, the door creaks open. You are led not into the heart of the monastery, but to a simple room in the guest house. Here, you will wait. For days, you are left mostly to yourself, a postulant, given food and a place to sleep, but held at arm's length. This is your cooling-off period, a final chance to reconsider, to turn around and walk back to the life you knew. But you stay. Your resolve, born of that deep, gnawing emptiness, holds firm. Finally, you are brought before the abbot. He is the elected father of this community, a man who holds absolute authority. His word is law. He sits not on a throne, but on a simple wooden chair, yet his presence fills the room. He questions you at length. Why are you here? What do you seek? Are you running from a crime? A debt? A woman? His questions are sharp, designed to pierce through any romantic notions you might have about this life. He is looking for stability, for humility, for a flicker of true vocation in your eyes. He dismisses you, and you wait again. Then, one day, the novice master comes for you. The abbot has consented. You are led to a small chapel where the other novices, a handful of young men and boys at various stages of their trial, are gathered. There, you are stripped of your worldly clothes, the rough tunic and leggings you arrived in. They are bundled away, to be kept in the storehouse. Should you fail and be cast out, they will be returned to you. In their place, you are given the simple, undyed habit of a novice. It feels strange, foreign, a costume for a part you haven't yet learned to play. You are now officially a novice, and your year of trial has begun. The novice master is an older monk, chosen for his stern demeanor and unwavering piety. His job is not to be your friend. His job is to break you. He is to test your spirit in a crucible of hardship to see if it is true gold or worthless dross. Your grand spiritual quest immediately dissolves into a relentless series of grueling, humiliating chores. You were expecting to spend your days in deep theological contemplation, perhaps debating the nature of angels with wise old scholars. Instead, your primary debate is with a stubborn patch of mildew in the abbey's washroom. The mildew is winning. You are sent to the kitchens to scrub pots coated in burnt porridge. You are sent to the infirmary to empty the chamber pots of sick and elderly monks. You are sent to the reredorer, a fancy name for the communal latrine, with a bucket and a brush. The work is nauseating. Your hands become raw from the harsh lye soap, and your back aches from dawn until the moment you collapse onto your straw mattress. This isn't an accident. It is the point. The labor is designed to systematically dismantle your worldly pride, to teach you that the lowest task done for the glory of God is more valuable than the highest honor sought for oneself. Even more challenging than the labor is the demand for absolute obedience. This is the central pillar of your new existence. The rule of Saint Benedict, the very constitution of this place, makes it explicitly clear that a monk's obedience to his superior should be instant and unconditional, offered without complaint, as if the command came from God himself. You quickly learn this is not a metaphor. The novice master might command you to do something pointless or seemingly absurd, purely to test your compliance. One of the most famous stories passed down among monks is of an elder who ordered a novice to plant a dead stick in the dry ground and water it daily. The novice obeyed without question, and after a year, the stick miraculously sprouted leaves. You are now living that story. The novice master tells you to count all the stones in the main courtyard. You start counting. An hour later, he returns, tells you that you've lost your place and must start over. It's the medieval version of a corporate team-building exercise. It's mostly pointless, and the real goal is to see if you'll submit to the process. To compound this, you are bound by a code of silence. For most of the day, speaking is forbidden. If you need to communicate, you must use a simple sign language, a gesture for bread, a sign for water, another for, I need to go and scrub the latrines again. The silence forces you into your own head, a terrifying and lonely place to be. All your doubts, your fears, your longing for your old life echo endlessly in the quiet. Scholars still debate whether the year-long novitiate was designed more as a spiritual filter to weed out the insincere, or as a psychological tool to ensure the complete assimilation and control of new members. From where you're standing, with aching muscles and a silent tongue, it feels a lot like the latter. Disillusionment is a bitter pill. This is not the holy refuge you imagined. You miss things you never thought you would. The freedom to walk where you pleased, the taste of your mother's cooking, even your brother's off-key singing. Right now, you'd trade your shot at eternal salvation for a single, hot meat pie, even a slightly burnt one. This is the true test. The physical hardship is nothing compared to the temptation to simply give up, to ask for your old clothes back, and to walk out the gate and never return. Every day, you have to find a reason to stay, to believe that this process of being unmade is the only way to be truly remade in the image of God. That long year of your novitiate finally grinds to a close. You have survived the back-breaking labor, the humiliating tests, and the crushing weight of silence and obedience. You have not run. You have not broken. The abbot and the novice master have deemed you ready. The time has come to take your vows, to bind yourself to this place and this life until death. The ceremony is one of solemn finality. Kneeling on the cold stone floor of the chapel before the entire community, you formally renounce the world. You will take vows of stability, binding you to this specific monastery forever, of conversion of life, a promise to continuously grow in monastic virtue, and of obedience to the abbot. But underpinning all of this is the first great sacrifice you must make tangible, the vow of poverty. You've already had a taste of this, of course. Your worldly clothes were taken from you the day you arrived. But now you must internalize the principle. It's not just about not having money in your pocket. It is the complete and utter annihilation of personal ownership. The core idea, you're taught, is to root out the demon of private possession, the very concept of mine. Pride, greed, and envy, they say, all begin with that single word. To free your soul for God, you must first free your hands from holding on to things. Your life is to be a direct imitation of Christ's apostles, who were said to have held all things in common. After your vows, you are led to the vestiary, the communal storeroom managed by a monk called the Chamberlain. He hands you your full habit as a professed monk. It consists of a tunic, a scapular for work, and the black, hooded cowl that is the iconic symbol of a Benedictine. The wool is thick, heavy, and itchy. It smells of lanolin and other, older bodies. It has been worn by others before you, patched at the elbows, the hem perhaps frayed from another man's journey. This is a crucial detail. It is not your robe. You are its current user. When it wears out, you will return it and be issued another. The same goes for your shoes, your thin blanket, your eating utensils, and the knife at your belt. You own nothing. It's the ultimate subscription service model, except you pay with your immortal soul and the only thing you get is a scratchy wool robe and unlimited access to grueling manual labor. There are no special perks, and the cancellation policy is, let's say, eternal. This is all laid out in the Rule of St. Benedict, which is now the operating system for your entire life. The rule is explicitly clear on this point. A monk is to have absolutely nothing of his own, neither a book, nor tablets, nor a pen, nor anything at all. The monastery is to have a common chest, an arca, from which all necessities are dispensed. Your sleeping space in the communal dormitory will be just that, a space. There is no private chest, no footlocker, no secret hiding spot for a memento from your past life. A mainstream historical fact of monastic life is that the abbot had the right to search your bed and pallet at any time, without warning, to ensure you were not hoarding any forbidden items. A single coin, a letter from your family, a carved token. To be caught with such a contraband item was to be found guilty of the most evil vice of private ownership, and it would earn you a severe public penance. But human nature is a stubborn weed. Even in this environment of radical dispossession, attachments form. You find yourself getting weirdly fond of a specific hoe with a handle worn smooth in just the right way. Or you discover a quiet corner in the cloister garden that catches the afternoon sun perfectly, and you start to think of it as your spot. You might even find yourself admiring a particular cleaning bucket. It's got a perfectly balanced handle, a satisfying weight, and you feel a small, illicit thrill of pride when you use it. The senior monks are trained to spot this. The moment the abbot sees you eyeing that bucket with a little too much affection, he'll reassign you to dung cart duty for a month, just to sever the unhealthy spiritual connection between you and your beloved pail. While the rule was absolute in theory, in practice, things could get a little messy. This brings us to a quirky little tidbit from monastic history, the problem of the peculium. This was the term for any private property or income a monk might acquire. Officially, it was impossible. But if a monk's wealthy family made a donation specifically for his comfort, or if a monk who was a skilled artisan was allowed to sell some of his work at a local fair, where did that money go? In some larger, more worldly abbeys, a blind eye was sometimes turned to small personal comforts. This created a constant tension between the ideal of absolute poverty and the reality of life in a large, wealthy institution. Centuries later, theologians and popes would engage in furious, high-stakes arguments, and historians still debate the precise definition of apostolic poverty. Could a community, an abbey, own vast tracts of land, hundreds of serfs, and golden chalices, as long as the individual monks incited on nothing personally? Or was true poverty a more radical, absolute state of dispossession that the comfortable Benedictine model didn't quite achieve? For you, these are not abstract theological questions. They are the fabric of your new reality. The vow of poverty is both terrifying and profoundly liberating. You will never have to worry about where your next meal is coming from, or if you will have a roof over your head. The community will provide. But in exchange, you have no agency, no individuality expressed through possessions. Even your body is no longer truly your own. It is a tool belonging to God and the community, its energy to be spent on work, and its voice to be used for prayer. All is directed by your abbot. Tonight, as you lie on your straw-filled mattress in the long, dark dormitory, you are one of many silent, shrouded figures. You wear a habit that is not yours, and a bed that is not yours, and a vast stone building that is not yours. The difficult, painful process of erasing the self is nearly complete. You are no longer an I. You are a we. You are floating in the shallow, dreamless sleep that is all your exhausted body can manage. There is no comfort here, just a brief, gray respite. Then it comes. A single, jarring clang of metal on metal. The great bell of the abbey, a sound that will punctuate your every waking and sleeping moment, begins its relentless toll. It's not a gentle awakening. It is a command, an iron summons from the dark. Your eyes snap open. For a confused moment, you don't know where you are. Then the cold hits you. It's a damp, penetrating chill that seems to emanate from the very stones of the monastery, seeping up through your straw pallet and thin wool blanket. You are in the dormitory, and it is the middle of the night. A soft groan ripples through the long, dark room as the other shrouded figures begin to stir. There is no option to hit a snooze button. There is no concept of 5 more minutes. To hesitate, to linger in the warmth of your bed, is to commit the sin of sloth, and it will be noticed. You swing your legs over the side of the plank bed, and your bare feet meet the freezing stone floor with a jolt that travels up your spine. You likely slept in most of your clothes, your tunic and leggings, for this very reason. You fumble in the dark for your shoes, pull your heavy cowl over your head, and join the silent, shuffling procession of ghosts making its way out of the dormitory and towards the church. The world outside the dormitory is a symphony of shadow and cold. Your breath plumes in front of your face. The only light comes from a single lantern carried by a senior monk, its flickering flame casting enormous, dancing shadows that make the familiar cloister arches look like the jaws of some great beast. The bell continues its solemn, rhythmic toll, counting down the moments until the service begins. The time, you know, is around 2 in the morning. This is the first and most important of the 8 daily prayer services, the night office, also known as matins or vigils. You file into the church, the air inside even colder and more cavernous than the cloister. You take your place in the choir stalls, the dark wood smooth and cold beneath your hands. Then, the chanting begins. It is the core of your existence here, the opus Dei, or work of God. The service is long, lasting for perhaps 2 hours. It is an intricate pattern of chanted psalms, hymns, and long readings from the Bible and the writings of the Church Fathers. It is a historical fact that the Benedictine rite is structured so that you and your brothers will recite all 150 psalms in the Psalter over the course of a single week, every week, for your entire life. In the profound, echoing darkness, you try to focus on the Latin, to lift your heart to God as you are supposed to. But your body wages a silent, desperate war against your spirit. Your head feels heavy, your eyelids like leaden shutters trying to close. You try to focus on the words, but your brain is only chanting a 3-word mantra. I want sleep. It's a battle, and your rebellious eyelids are staging a full-scale insurrection. You stand when you are supposed to stand, sit when you are supposed to sit, and try not to let your head nod forward, a dead giveaway that you have lost the fight. You are not alone in this struggle, and the monastery has a system for it. This brings us to a wonderfully quirky monastic role, the circador. He is a monk assigned to patrol the choir stalls during the long night services. He carries a shaded lantern, and his job is to be the Sandman's enemy. He walks silently up and down the aisles, listening for the telltale signs of a brother who has succumbed to slumber. If he finds you dozing, head on your chest, he won't shout or shake you. He will simply place the lantern on the floor in front of you and continue on his way. The light, or the sudden realization of its presence, will startle you awake. You are now filled with a quiet shame. It becomes your duty to pick up the lantern and resume the patrol, hunting for the next sleeper to pass your humiliation onto. It's a quiet, effective, and deeply embarrassing system of accountability. This schedule of broken, insufficient rest is not an unfortunate byproduct of the life. It is a central feature. This is your new normal, a state of structured, chronic sleep deprivation. The theory is that subduing the body's base need for sleep is a powerful ascetic practice. It weakens the flesh and its sinful desires, and it is meant to make the spirit more alert and receptive to divine grace. But as you stand there, swaying slightly in the dark, you have your doubts. They say it brings you closer to God, but mostly it seems to bring you closer to developing a very serious caffeine addiction. 5 full centuries before coffee will even be introduced to Europe. You would commit unspeakable acts for a cup of strong, black coffee, but all you have is holy water, and it just doesn't hit the same. Historians and sleep scientists still argue whether this severely biphasic, or even polyphasic, sleep schedule was spiritually edifying, or simply a form of chronic fatigue that induced hallucinations and visions, which were then interpreted as divine communications. Was that brilliant flash of insight you had during the 5th Psalm a message from an angel, or the protest of a brain crying out for REM sleep? Finally, the last prayer is said. The service is over, but you do not get to go back to bed for a solid 8 hours. You file back to the dormitory for another short, fragile block of sleep, perhaps only for an hour or two. Just as you manage to drift off, the bell tolls again. This time, it's for lauds, the service at sunrise. The whole process repeats itself. You rise, you shuffle to the church, you chant. At least this time, the first week, gray light of dawn is filtering through the high, arched windows, promising that the day has a sun and the world is not just an endless, cold night. Lauds is a service of praise, shorter and slightly more cheerful than matins. But by the time it is over, you have already been awake for the better part of 3 hours, and your workday hasn't even begun. People in your old village are still sound asleep, probably dreaming of warm bread and a plentiful harvest. You've already put in a full shift of liturgical chanting. It really puts your old complaints about waking up early to milk the cows into a very humbling perspective. As you file out of the chapel, the first true light of day spills into the cloister walkways. The pre-dawn prayers are complete, but this is no time for relaxation. The day is now a block of time that must be filled, and it will not be filled according to your whims or moods. Every single moment from now until you are permitted to sleep again is governed by an invisible, all-encompassing architecture. You are about to begin your day under the microscope of the rule of Saint Benedict. If the monastery is a machine for producing salvation, the rule is its intricate, uncompromising operating manual. You don't read this rule just once. It is a constant presence. A chapter is read aloud every day during the communal meeting, and its principles are woven into every correction from the abbot, every task from the novice master, every aspect of your life. It's less of a spiritual guide and more of the most detailed and intense employee handbook ever written. Written back in the 6th century, this book of precepts became the gold standard for Western monasticism, a historical fact largely thanks to the Emperor Charlemagne, who, around the year 800, pushed for it to be adopted by monasteries throughout his vast empire to create a uniform standard of pious living. The rule dictates everything, from the proper way to show hospitality to a guest, to the graduated punishments for infractions, to what to do if you accidentally break a rake. Spoiler: you have to confess it publicly. The guiding philosophy is often summarized by a phrase that doesn't actually appear in the text, but perfectly captures its spirit. Ora et labora, pray and work. Your life is a rhythm, a pendulum swinging between these two poles. The day is meticulously divided between the formal prayer services, the Opus Dei, and the hours of manual labor or study. There is no downtime. Idleness, the rule states, is the enemy of the soul. The schedule itself is your primary spiritual tool, designed to keep your body busy and your mind from straying into sinful or worldly thoughts. Beyond the schedule, the rule provides a psychological roadmap to dismantling your ego. The most famous part is Chapter 7, which outlines the 12 degrees of humility. It's a ladder you are expected to climb, or rather, descend. It begins with the simple fear of God, but it moves quickly to suppressing your own will, obeying your superiors, silently embracing hardship, and believing yourself to be the lowliest of all creatures. The final runs involve your very posture. You must always keep your eyes downcast, speak softly, and avoid laughter. It is a step-by-step guide to achieving a state of complete and total self-abnegation. And the rule's micromanagement is breathtaking. When you are assigned to the kitchens, you learn that the tools and vessels there are to be cared for as if they were the sacred vessels on the altar. If you are sent to the scriptorium, the same applies to the books and quills. When a guest arrives, particularly a poor pilgrim, you are taught to receive them as if they were Christ himself, with the abbot often washing their feet in a ritual of humility. There's even a quirky and wonderfully practical chapter on the measure of drink. Realizing he couldn't realistically expect his monks to be complete teetotalers, Saint Benedict permits what he calls a hemina of wine for each monk per day. That's an old Roman measure, maybe equivalent to a generous glass. He writes, with a tone of weary pragmatism, that this should be enough. But if the labor is especially hard or the weather unusually hot, the abbot has the discretion to increase the amount, but he sternly warns against ever falling into satiety and drunkenness. So yes, you get a specific, divinely sanctioned daily wine allowance. It's arguably the best perk of the job, a little something to take the edge off the existential dread and the constant, early morning chanting. You just have to be careful not to enjoy it too much, which is sort of the guiding theme for everything else in here. While tradition holds that Saint Benedict wrote this masterful guide himself in his monastery at Monte Cassino, historians still debate the extent of his direct authorship. There is a compelling theory, supported by textual analysis, that Benedict heavily borrowed from, or perhaps edited, an earlier and much longer monastic text known as the Regula Magistri, or the Rule of the Master. This anonymous text is far more pedantic, repetitive, and severe in its tone. If this theory is true, Benedict's genius was not in creating something from scratch, but in taking a harsh and unwieldy document and making it more moderate, humane, and psychologically astute. Living under such a system is a strange paradox. On the one hand, it's a cage. Your every action is prescribed. Your every thought is supposed to be policed. There is no room for spontaneity, for personal expression, for the simple act of choosing what to do next. But on the other hand, it offers a profound sense of security. You never have to suffer from the anxiety of choice. Forget agonizing over your career path or what to do with your life. Your biggest decision on any given day might be whether to use your spoon or a piece of hard bread to get the last of the thin vegetable stew from your bowl. And even then, you're pretty sure the rule has an opinion on it somewhere in Chapter 39, on the manner of eating. This rigid structure holds your world together, protecting you from both external chaos and your own internal demons of doubt and desire. You are a cog, but you are a cog in what you believe to be God's own perfect machine. And as you head out towards the fields for the first work session of the morning, you accept your place in its grand, intricate, and demanding design. You head out from the central cloister, following a small group of your brothers. The sun is climbing, burning off the last of the morning chill, and the day's work is about to begin. The principle of ora et labora, pray and work, now shifts to its second pillar. You have prayed, now you will work. You are taught that this labor is not a punishment or a mere necessity for survival. It is a holy act in itself. Laborare est orare. The work is to pray. The rhythmic motion of your body, the sweat on your brow, the focused effort of your hands, all of this is a wordless prayer, a way of honoring God by participating in the stewardship of His creation. It's a beautiful philosophy, one that dignifies the peasant drudgery you thought you had left behind. The difference is that now, the toil is meant to purify your soul, not just fill your stomach. Your destination today is the fields. The monastery is a largely self-sufficient community, a bustling hub of agriculture and craft that stands as an island of productivity in a fractured world. This self-sufficiency is a core historical fact of the great Benedictine houses. They were economic engines, draining swamps, clearing forests, and preserving agricultural techniques. As a rank-and-file monk, you are the literal engine of this enterprise. You are handed a heavy, crudely made hoe and pointed towards a seemingly endless patch of stubbornly resilient weeds that are threatening the monastery's bean crop. The work is hard, monotonous, and backbreaking. The sun beats down on your tonsured head and the back of your neck. Your will habit, so welcome in the pre-dawn chill, is now a sweltering, itchy torment. Sweat drips into your eyes, blurring your vision. Your back quickly begins to ache with a familiar, deep burn. You quickly realize that the 12 degrees of humility are a lot easier to contemplate in theory than when you're ankle-deep in mud and a stubborn donkey has decided to stage a protest right in the middle of the turnip patch. At this moment, you feel a distinct lack of Christian charity towards this particular donkey. Not all labor happens in the fields. On other days, you might be assigned to one of the many workshops that ring the monastery grounds. You could be sent to the bakehouse, the air thick with the glorious smell of bread, where you need massive troughs of dough. You could be in the brewery, stirring a vast, steaming cauldron of barley and hops. As brewing beer was a vital monastic skill, the result was safer to drink than water and a crucial source of calories. You might be in the smithy, the roar of the forge in your ears, swinging a hammer to repair a broken plowshare. Or you could be in the tailor's workshop, your hands, clumsy from the fields, trying to master the delicate work of patching a threadbare cowl. Your resume is getting incredibly diverse. Skills include liturgical chanting, advanced floor scrubbing, beginner-level blacksmithing, and a demonstrated ability to lose an argument with a goat. It's not the career path you originally envisioned, but it's certainly varied. One of the most respected and fascinating forms of monastic labor is beekeeping. This is a quirky but vital part of the abbey's economy. The monks are master apiarists, and for good reason. Honey is the main source of sweetener for the community, but even more importantly, the beeswax is needed to make the pure, sweet-smelling candles that burn on the church altar during Massachusetts tallow candles, made from animal fat, were common for everyday use, but they were smoky, smelly, and considered unfit for sacred worship. Working with the bees requires a very monastic temperament, patience, calm, and a quiet courage. You watch the bee master, an old monk with a serene face and hands like wrinkled leather, as he gently handles the straw skeps that house the colonies. He moves slowly, deliberately, and the bees swarm around him in a buzzing cloud, but do not sting. It is a quiet, meditative work that produces both a practical product in honey and a deeply spiritual one, the very light that will illuminate the holy sacraments. This labor, whatever it may be, is performed in silence. You work alongside your brothers, the only sounds being the rhythmic thud of a hoe, the scrape of a plane on wood, or the buzz of the bees. This silence transforms the experience. Without chatter to distract you, the work itself has to become your focus. It becomes a moving meditation. Your mind, ideally, is meant to be filled with prayer. Your thoughts turn towards God as your hands toil. In reality, your mind often just goes blank, exhausted by the physical effort and the lack of sleep. You work beside other men for hours, days, years, but you are functionally alone, trapped in your own head with your aching muscles and whatever prayers you can manage to summon. The sheer productivity of hundreds of organized, disciplined men created immense wealth for the monasteries over the centuries. Historians still debate the overall economic role of these great Benedictine houses. Were they purely charitable institutions that drained swamps, preserved knowledge, and created islands of stability in a chaotic world? Or did they become, in effect, massive feudal corporations, accumulating vast estates and incredible wealth, dominating the local economy and sometimes acting as unforgiving landlords to the very peasants they were meant to serve? Your work period is not determined by the sun alone. It is framed by prayer. After a few hours in the field, just as your muscles are screaming in protest, the abbey bell rings out once more. It is the call to one of the little hours of the divine office, terce, at mid-morning. Instantly, tools are lowered. You take your hoe and clean the mud from it, carefully placing it back in the tool shed. The rule is clear that the monastery's tools are to be treated with the same respect as the sacred vessels of the altar. You and your brothers line up at the stone lavabo, a large basin in the cloister, to wash the dirt from your hands and face. Then, the procession reforms, and you shuffle back into the church. You go from digging up beans to chanting psalms in the space of about 10 minutes. It's a bit of a mental whiplash. One minute you're contemplating the eternal damnation of thistles, the next you're contemplating the eternal salvation of your soul. The subject matter, you sometimes think, is surprisingly similar. Your body is tired and covered in a fine layer of grime, but your soul must be ready to sing. After the brief prayer service of terce, you are sent back to work. The sun climbs higher, the labor continues, your stomach begins to rumble with a hollow, insistent ache. Just as the sun reaches its zenith, the great bell tolls again, this time calling you to sext, the midday prayer. You go through the familiar ritual: stop work, clean your tools, wash your hands, file into the church, and chant the psalms appointed for the hour. This service is a punctuation mark in the day, but more importantly, it signals what comes next. As you file out of the church, you do not turn back towards the fields or workshops. You turn towards the refectory. It is time for the main meal of the day. The refectory is a long, high-ceilinged hall, much like the church in its austere simplicity. Light streams in from high windows, illuminating the rows of long, narrow wooden tables and simple backless benches. You join the silent procession of monks, filing in according to seniority, the oldest and most venerable members first, down to the youngest novices like yourself. At the entrance, you once again wash your hands at the stone lavabo, a symbolic and very practical act of purification. You find your assigned spot at the table and stand, hands tucked into the sleeves of your habit. Not a single crumb of bread is touched, not a single cup is lifted, until the abbot is entered and intoned a grace. Only then, at a signal, do you sit. The meal itself is an exercise in monastic moderation. You have been fantasizing about food for hours, your stomach churning with hunger, but what is placed before you is humble fare. The centerpiece of the Benedictine diet, a foundational historical fact laid out in the rule, is that the meat of four-footed animals is strictly forbidden, unless you are very sick. So you can forget about roast beef, savory pork, or rich lamb stew. Such luxuries are for the outside world. Instead, the servers, monks assigned to kitchen and refectory duty for the week, place before you two different cooked dishes. This is a provision of the rule, so that if a monk dislikes one, he might eat of the other. They are almost always forms of pottage, a thick stew of boiled vegetables, grains, and legumes. Today, it's a brownish-gray lentil stew and a greenish mush of boiled cabbage and herbs. Alongside this, you receive a substantial chunk of coarse, dark bread and, if you're lucky, a small piece of cheese or a hard-boiled egg. Your cup is filled with either watered-down wine or the thin, weak beer brewed in the abbey. It's nourishing. It's sufficient to fuel an afternoon of hard labor, but it is profoundly, unforgettably bland. The menu is on a very predictable rotation. Today's bean and cabbage stew, tomorrow's cabbage and bean stew. You started to have vivid, borderline sinful dreams about a roasted chicken. The most striking feature of the meal, however, is not the food, but the sound. Or rather, the lack of it. The meal is eaten in absolute, profound silence. There is no conversation, no idle chatter, no clanking of cutlery encouraged. The only sound permitted is the single, clear voice of the designated reader, the lector. For the entire week, it is his duty to stand at a lectern at the front of the refectory and read aloud from a sacred text. He provides food for the soul, while you receive food for the body. You chew your dense bread and scoop your watery stew while listening to a chapter from the Gospels, or a homily from St. Augustine, or a particularly gruesome account from the lives of the martyrs. You have to be careful not to get too engrossed. Last week, listening to a dramatic passage about St. Peter's crucifixion, Brother Ambrosius was so captivated he accidentally fumbled his entire piece of bread into his cup of wine. The silent, collective judgment he received from 100 pairs of eyes was more withering than any public rebuke. But how do you function without speaking? What if you need more bread? This is where a quirky and practical solution comes in, a complex system of monastic sign language. Over the centuries, these signs became highly specific. If you need more bread, you make a circle with your thumb and forefinger. If you desire wine, you raise a curled index finger to your lips. To request fish, a common dish, since it wasn't considered meat from a four-legged beast, you flatten your hand and wave it from side to side, mimicking a fish's tail swimming away. An entire vocabulary of gestures allows this silent meal to proceed in an orderly fashion. Of course, the strictness of the diet is a matter of some debate. Historians and archaeologists still argue about how rigorously that no meat rule was followed in practice. While the rule was clear, analysis of monastic kitchen waste pits from later, wealthier periods sometimes reveals a surprising quantity of pork and beef bones. This suggests that the definition of sick might have been stretched to include the abbot and his important guests, or that on great feast days, the rules were conveniently relaxed for the health and morale of the community. The meal ends as it began, with ritual. The abbot gives a signal, and the lector falls silent. The abbot stands, and everyone else rises in unison. A final prayer of thanks is offered. The servers move down the tables to collect any leftover bread or food, which will be distributed to the poor who gather at the monastery gate. You file out of the refectory as silently as you entered. In the summer months, the schedule allows for a brief period of rest after the main meal. This is your siesta, and it might be the most cherished part of your day. You retire to the dormitory, the afternoon sun warming the long room. You are permitted to lie down on your pallet, a welcome reprieve for your aching back. A full stomach and the midday warmth combine to bring on a heavy drowsiness. This is the highlight of your day. You have about an hour before the bell will toll again for the afternoon prayers. You've learned to fall asleep faster than a knight tumbling from his horse in a joust. You close your eyes, and for a few precious moments, there is no work, no prayer, just a quiet, blessed oblivion. Your blessed hour of post-lunch oblivion is shattered, as all good things are, by the tolling of the bell. It is the call for none, the 9th hour, the mid-afternoon prayer service. You join the familiar procession to the church, chant the familiar psalms, and feel the familiar drowsiness trying to pull you back under. After the service, you expect to be sent back to the fields to finish the afternoon's weeding. But today is different. The cellarer, the monk in charge of daily work assignments, directs you and a few others not towards the gardens, but towards the north side of the cloister, where the light is most consistent. You are being sent to the scriptorium. This is the intellectual heart of the monastery, the place where God's word and the wisdom of the ancients are made immortal. In your mind, you may have pictured a grand, vaulted library, warm and cozy, filled with wise old scholars murmuring thoughtfully. The reality is a cold, silent room, specifically designed to be fire-free to protect its priceless contents from the ever-present risk of catastrophe. The only heat is the meager warmth of your own body. The silence here is even more profound than in the refectory. The head of the scriptorium, the armarius, is the guardian of the books. He assigns you your task with a series of quiet gestures. Today, you are a copyist, a human printing press. Your workspace is a small, slanted wooden desk called a carrel. The armarius places two things before you. The first is the exemplar, the precious, already ancient manuscript you are to copy. The second is a stack of newly prepared parchment. This isn't paper, it's vellum, made from the stretched, scraped, and treated skin of a calf. It is astronomically expensive, and every sheet represents a significant portion of the monastery's wealth. You are given your tools, a wickedly sharp penknife for constantly recutting the tip of your quill, a pot of thick, black oak gall ink, and a goose feather quill. The first step is to prepare the page, using a stylus to prick tiny holes and rule fate, invisible guidelines across the vellum so your lines of text will be straight. Then, the work begins. You dip your quill, tap off the excess, and begin to form the letters. It is an act of intense, microscopic focus. Each stroke, each curve of the complex black-letter script must be a perfect imitation of the exemplar. This is not creative work. This is an act of pure, painstaking reproduction. The silence is broken only by the faintest scratch of quill on vellum. Very quickly, you discover that this scholarly labor is as physically grueling as any work you've done in the fields. After only an hour, a deep, burning ache settles in your shoulders and between your shoulder blades from hunching forward. Your fingers cramp into a claw around the quill. But the worst part is the strain on your eyes. The light from the cloister walk is dim and indirect, and you are squinting to see both the tiny letters in the old book and the new ones you are forming. Your eyes begin to water, then to burn. After a few hours, you feel about 100 years old. Your back has formed a permanent question mark. Your eyes feel like they've been rubbed with sand, and your right hand is locked in a painful cramp. This is the intellectual side of monasticism, and it feels suspiciously like a slow, methodical torture technique designed to gradually pretzel your spine. Yet, as you work, you are aware of the profound importance of this task. It is a mainstream historical fact that you and your fellow scribes in monasteries across Europe are the sole guardians of Western civilization. You are copying not just the Bible, but the works of Virgil, Cicero, Ovid, and the great Greek philosophers, texts that would have otherwise vanished forever during the long, chaotic centuries following the fall of Rome. This tedious, painful work is the thin, vellum thread connecting the ancient world to the future. Every perfectly formed letter is a victory against the darkness and decay outside your cloister walls. The mental strain is immense. A single lapse in concentration, a moment of daydreaming, can lead to a disastrous error. You're copying a complex theological argument, and your mind wanders for a split second, thinking about the taste of the weak beer you had at lunch. Suddenly, you realize you've skipped an entire line of text. Panic flashes through you. Vellum is too precious to waste. You take your knife and begin the painstaking, nerve-wracking process of scraping the ink from the surface of the animal skin without tearing it, your heart pounding with every tiny flake that comes away. You've seen the notes, the colophons, that scribes sometimes add in the margins at the very end of a finished manuscript. This quirky habit reveals the humanity behind the work. Some are simple complaints. My back is broken, or the ink is bad. Others are more dramatic, like the scribe who wrote a curse upon anyone who might dare to steal the book he had spent months creating. For him that stealeth this book, let it change into a serpent in his hand and rend him. Let him be struck with palsy, and all his members blasted. While you work, you can certainly understand the sentiment. Of course, the very act of copying invites questions. While we praise scribes for preserving texts, historians and textual critics still debate the fidelity of these copies. Was the scribe always an objective conduit? Or did his own fatigue, his own beliefs, his own biases, lead him to consciously or unconsciously alter the words before him? Did he correct a theological point he found troubling? Did he misread a word and create an error that would then be faithfully duplicated by the next scribe, and the next, for centuries to come? The line between preservation and alteration is a fine one. The light in the cloister begins to fade, turning from gray to gold. Just as you feel you can't focus your burning eyes for a moment longer, the bell rings for Vespers, the sunset prayer. You stop, your body screaming in protest as you try to unhunch yourself. Your spine makes a series of cracking sounds like a dry branch snapping. You carefully clean your quill, cap the ink pot, and cover your work. You look down at the single, beautiful, perfect page of text you have produced in a whole afternoon of work. At this rate, you calculate, you'll finish this book in about 3 years. Or go blind. Whichever comes first. The chill you picked up in the scriptorium settles deep into your bones. After the sunset prayer of Vespers and a meager supper of bread and watery soup, you shuffled back to the dormitory and collapse onto your pallet, your body aching in ways that have nothing to do with honest labor. Sleep offers little relief. You are jolted awake by the bell for matins, but this time, a violent shiver racks your body, and a fire seems to have been lit behind your eyes. You are sick. You try to hide it at first, standing through the long night service with your teeth chattering, muffling a deep, hacking cough in the sleeve of your habit. Sickness is an inconvenience, a disruption to the sacred rhythm of the community. But by the time the sun rises for lauds, there is no hiding it. You are feverish, weak, and dizzy. An elder monk notices your pale face and glassy eyes and gestures for you to step out of the choir. You must present yourself to the infirmarian, the monk entrusted with the care of the sick. He is the abbey's doctor, nurse, and pharmacist, a man whose knowledge is a complex mixture of ancient medical texts, practical herbalism, and profound faith. He takes one look at you, feels your brow, listens to your rattling cough, and nods grimly. You are officially relieved of all duties and escorted to the infirmary. This building is a monastery within the monastery. It is a quieter, slower world, but it is heavy with the scent of sickness and medicinal herbs, and the palpable weight of suffering. Here, the rigid rules of the main abbey are relaxed. You are given a bed that is slightly softer than your usual plank and straw, and the atmosphere is one of hushed concern. The infirmarian's first course of treatment is prayer. Your illness is seen not just as a physical ailment, but as a spiritual trial, a test of your faith and humility. The entire community will offer prayers for your recovery at chapter meetings. The next step is to diagnose the problem according to the best medical science of the day. This brings us to a core historical fact of medieval medicine, the theory of the four humors. Passed down from the ancient Greek physician Galen, it holds that your body's health depends on a perfect balance of four essential fluids: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. Your fever and cough are clear signs of an excess of phlegm, the humor considered cold and moist. Therefore, the infirmarian's goal is to counteract this by introducing hot and dry elements into your system. He consults his herbarium, a precious book detailing the medicinal properties of plants, and prepares a steaming, pungent tea of hyssop and horehound to break up the congestion in your chest. The taste is bitter, like boiled weeds, but you drink it down obediently. There is, however, one significant perk to being sick. In the infirmary, the strict Benedictine prohibition against eating the meat of four-footed animals is lifted. The rule explicitly allows the sick to eat meat to regain their strength. So while you shiver with fever and cough up a lung, you are brought a bowl of rich, greasy chicken broth, and perhaps even a small piece of boiled mutton. It's a shocking luxury. As you slurp down the broth, you decide it's the most delicious thing you have ever tasted. Getting dangerously ill is almost worth it for the catering upgrade. If the herbal remedies and restorative diet don't work, the infirmarian moves on to the main event of medieval medicine, bloodletting. Based on the humoral theory, draining a bit of blood is thought to be the quickest way to remove an excess of a humor and restore balance. The infirmarian comes to your bedside with a sharp, pointed lancet, and a shallow brass bowl. He explains calmly that he needs to breathe a vein. It feels less like a medical procedure and more like he's about to prepare you for dinner and needs to drain the fluids first. You are too weak to protest, and besides, questioning the infirmarian's medical judgment is definitely not one of the 12 steps to humility. He makes a quick, practiced incision on the inside of your elbow, and you watch, detached, as your own dark, vital blood flows into the bowl. The timing of these procedures is anything but random. This introduces a quirky tidbit: the deep connection between medicine and astrology. The infirmarian likely has a medical almanac containing a zodiac man, a diagram showing which parts of the body are governed by which astrological signs. He would consult this, along with the phases of the moon, to determine the most auspicious moment to let blood or administer a specific remedy. Leading your arm while the moon is in Gemini might be considered beneficial, but doing so while it's in Pisces could be disastrous. It's a seamless blend of science, faith, and celestial magic. The whole experience makes you ponder the efficacy of this care. Historians and medical anthropologists still debate whether monastic infirmaries were genuinely effective places of healing or simply cleaner, more organized places to die. The emphasis on rest, cleanliness, and nutrition was undoubtedly superior to the care most people received outside the monastery walls. But did the universal reliance on bleeding patients who were already weakened by illness ultimately do more harm than good? Lying in the semi-darkness of the infirmary, you feel a profound sense of isolation. You are cut off from the comforting, relentless routine that has structured your every waking moment. You listen to the sounds of suffering around you, the shallow breathing of the old monk in the next bed, the delirious muttering of a novice with a high fever. For the first time in a long time, you have too much time to think, and your thoughts turn to fear. You pray, but your prayers are tangled with the terrifying possibility that you might never leave this room. After a week of being bled, prayed for, and force-fed herbal concoctions that taste like boiled socks, your fever finally breaks. You wake one morning drenched in sweat, but clear-headed. You are weak, hollowed out, but you are alive. The first thing you know you must do is go to confession, primarily to admit that for the last 2 days, you were secretly, simply glad that Brother Thomas in the bed next to you was coughing much, much louder than you were. You are deemed recovered. The infirmarian, with a final prayer and a warning not to overexert yourself, discharges you from his care. The brief, fever-induced interlude of relative comfort is over. The luxury of meat broth, a slightly softer mattress, and the quiet solitude of the infirmary vanishes. You are returned to the common life, rejoining the great, grinding wheel of the monastic routine. As the day draws to a close with the evening prayer of Vespers and a light supper of bread and cheese, you feel a sense of dread for the approaching night. You have been reminded of what comfort feels like, which makes its absence all the more acute. After supper, there is a period for quiet reading. The community gathers in the cloister as the abbot reads from a holy text. Then, as darkness completely envelopes the monastery, the bell tolls for the last time in the waking day. It is the call for Compline. This is the final prayer service, the completion of the day. It is short and solemn, a quiet appeal for God's protection against the terrors of the night. As the final Amen echoes in the chapel, the great silence begins. From this moment until prime, the first prayer of the new day, not a single word may be spoken for any reason. To do so is a grave fault. In silent procession, You and your brothers shuffle out of the church and make your way to the dormitory. The dormitorium, as it's called in the rule, is a vast, long hall on an upper floor. The air inside strikes you with the force of a physical blow. It is frigid. The stone walls radiate a deep, ancient cold that no amount of human warmth can dispel. The only light comes from a single oil lamp that, according to the rule, must be kept burning all night, casting weak, flickering shadows across the cavernous space. Your bed is exactly as you left it, a hard wooden plank with a thin, rustling sack filled with straw, a palliasse, laid on top. You have one, perhaps two, coarse woolen blankets. There are no partitions, no curtains, no privacy whatsoever. You are simply one body in a long, neat row of bodies. The cold is a constant, oppressive enemy. While monasteries were often marvels of medieval engineering, with complex water systems and functional workshops, effective heating was a luxury reserved for a single room. It's a historical fact that the only heated space in a typical Benedictine abbey was the calefactory, or warming room. On the most bitter winter days, monks would be allowed to go there in small groups for a few precious minutes to thaw their numb fingers and toes before returning to their duties. But you did not sleep there. Your nights were spent in this refrigerated stone box. The rule of St. Benedict specifies that you must sleep fully clothed, with your leather belt, or girdle, still fastened. On the surface, this is for practicality and modesty, ensuring you are always ready for the call to prayer. You, however, know the real reason this rule is so easy to follow. It's a basic survival technique. To disrobe completely in this environment would be to invite a deep, unshakable chill that you might never recover from. So you lie down in your tunic and leggings, pulling the rough blanket up to your chin, already dressed for the 2 a.m. wake-up call. The rule says you should sleep clothed to be ever ready for prayer. You suspect it's really because if you ever took everything off, your body would flash freeze into a monk-shaped ice sculpture before you even hit the mattress. It's less about piety and more about preventing advanced hypothermia. You try to settle down, but sleep is elusive. The lack of privacy is absolute. You are surrounded by the noises of other sleeping men. And the bed to your right, old Brother Simeon has begun his nightly symphony of snores, each one a rattling explosion of sound. On your left, a young novice whistles softly with every exhale. Someone coughs. Someone else groans and turns, their straw mattress crackling loudly in the silence. It's like trying to find peace in a barnyard orchestra. The vow of silence is a blessing during the day, but you dearly wish it could be applied to sleeping brothers. As you lie there, listening to the cacophony, you think of the strange, twisted figures carved on the roof of the church high above you. The gargoyles. Their primary function is to serve as waterspouts, but their leering, demonic faces are also a quirky and constant reminder of the spiritual dangers that prowl the night. They are the stone sentinels guarding against the very temptations and nightmares that might assail a man in his sleep, in this vulnerable state between the world and the spirit. This complete and total immersion in the collective is a powerful tool. Historians and sociologists still debate the long-term psychological effects of this utter lack of privacy. Did living every single moment, waking and sleeping, under the constant gaze of the community successfully sublimate the individual ego and forge a powerful, unified spiritual body? Or did it create a state of perpetual, low-level anxiety and a desperate, secret inner craving for just a few moments of true solitude? You lie on your back as instructed, hands folded over your chest, and try to force your body to relax. The cold is a living thing, gnawing at your toes and fingertips. The blanket is scratchy. The straw pokes you through the thin sacking. You close your eyes and try to meditate on a psalm, but your mind keeps drifting back to the infirmary bed. You feel a pang of longing for its relative softness, a sinful thought you immediately suppress and file away for your next confession. You finally begin to drift off, only to be plunged into a frantic dream where you are being chased by a giant, angry cabbage from the monastery garden. Just as it's about to corner you in the cloister, the loud clang of the matins bell rips you from your sleep. You are saved by the bell, but you also have to get up and face the freezing darkness. It is a classic monastic win-lose situation. The routine grinds on. The bell tolls. You pray. You work. You eat your bland food. You try to sleep in the suffocating cold. The physical hardships, which once seemed like the ultimate test, begin to fade into a dull, aching backdrop. You are becoming accustomed to the life of the body. Now, the true battle begins, the one for which all this physical discipline is merely basic training. It is the war waged against the landscape of your own mind, a constant, silent struggle against worldly temptations and inner demons, a striving for a purity of heart that feels impossibly, infuriatingly distant. Theologians and the early desert fathers, whose wisdom forms the bedrock of monastic spirituality, codified the enemy. This is a historical fact. Long before the world knew of the 7 deadly sins, monastic tradition spoke of the 8 evil thoughts, a framework developed by thinkers like Evagrius Ponticus. These were the primary demonic assaults on the soul: gluttony, fornication, avarice, sadness, anger, aestia, vainglory, and pride. You came to the monastery to escape the world, but you soon discover you brought the entire corrupt, chaotic world with you, packed neatly inside your own skull. The temptations are not always grand and dramatic. Most are subtle, insidious, and deeply personal. Take gluttony. You are never in danger of truly feasting, but the thought of food becomes an obsession. During the long afternoon prayer service, you find yourself not contemplating the divine mysteries, but mentally composing an elaborate, multi-course banquet. It starts with a whole roasted pig with an apple in its mouth, and ends with delicate honey cakes soaked in cream. This is your mental happy place, and you have a sinking feeling it is probably going to earn you a very long stay in the bad place. It's the pang of envy you feel when you see Brother Leo, who works in the bakehouse, get a slightly larger, less burnt piece of bread than you. That tiny, hot spark of resentment, that is the demon of gluttony at work. Anger, too, is a quiet poison. You cannot shout or argue, so fury festers inwardly. It's the simmering rage you feel towards Brother Cuthbert, who snores, which you remember all too well from last night, seem to shake the very foundations of the dormitory. It's the flash of irritation when the prior corrects your chanting, your pride wounded in front of your brothers. You swallow it down. You force your face into a mask of humility, but inside, the anger churns like a foul acid. Then there is sadness, and its more dangerous cousin, aestia, the noonday demon you felt even in your old life. Here in the cloister, it can descend like a thick, gray fog, draining all meaning from your routine. It whispers that your prayers are bouncing off a deaf heaven, that your labor is pointless, that God has forgotten you. It is a profound spiritual exhaustion that makes getting out of your cold bed feel like lifting a mountain. But the temptation the monks feared above all others, the one they believed demons used most skillfully, was that of the flesh. Your vow of chastity is not a one-time decision. It is a daily, hourly, moment-by-moment war. You are surrounded by men. You live a life scrubbed clean of feminine presence, but you cannot erase your own memory. A random image can flood your mind without warning. The memory of a girl's laugh from your old village, the brief, accidental touch of her hand as you passed in the market. These thoughts are seen as literal fiery darts flung by demons. You are supposed to be meditating on the passion of Christ, but your treacherous brain decides it's the perfect time to replay a startlingly vivid memory of the barmaid at the local tavern. You try to banish the image by frantically reciting a psalm, but the holy words just seem to twist themselves into a new rhythm, chanting her name back at you. It is deeply, deeply unhelpful. This anxiety about stray thoughts was so profound that it even gave birth to a quirky, specific demon, Tudavilis. According to popular medieval folklore, Tudavilis was a demon whose sole job was to hang around during church services with a large sack. He would listen for any words that were mumbled, skipped, or mispronounced by the monks during their chanting. He also collected all the idle chatter and gossip spoken during times of supposed silence. He would stuff all these wasted syllables into his sack and diligently carry them to hell, where they would be presented as evidence against you on Judgment Day. The very idea turns every mental lapse into an act of direct collaboration with the forces of darkness. How do you fight back? You are taught a spiritual arsenal. You repeat short prayers under your breath, the Jesus prayer being a favorite. Lord Jesus Christ, Son of God, have mercy on me, a sinner. You practice custody of the eyes, keeping your gaze lowered to avoid any sight that might trigger a stray thought. You go to confession regularly, laying bare your ugliest thoughts for your abbot, an act of humiliation that is thought to rob the thoughts of their secret power. Some monks take it further, practicing mortification of the flesh by wearing a cilice, a rough hair shirt, beneath their habit. It's constant, itching irritation of physical pain meant to distract from the more dangerous pains of the soul. From a modern viewpoint, the source of these struggles seems clear. Historians and psychologists still debate the root of these intense demonic experiences. Were they genuine supernatural assaults, as every monk firmly believed? Or were they the predictable and understandable psychological consequences of extreme sleep deprivation, sensory monotony, relentless physical hardship, and the total repression of all sexual and emotional impulse, manifesting as vivid hallucinations and obsessive, intrusive thoughts? For you, there is no debate. The fight is real. You are a soldier on a battlefield no one else can see. You came to the monastery seeking peace and quiet, only to discover that your own mind is the loudest, most chaotic, and most terrifying place in the universe. It's like a crowded market in there, with demons hawking cheap temptations and bad memories shouting over each other. You sometimes wish you could take a vow of silence from yourself. The quest for purity feels like trying to carry water in a sieve. You empty your mind in prayer, and the world rushes right back in. As the days bleed into weeks and the weeks into months, You learn that for all the talk of humility and brotherhood, this house of God is anything but a classless society. You had imagined a community of equals, all brothers walking the same path. But you quickly discover that the monastery has a social and political structure as rigid and complex as any royal court. While you may all be equal in the eyes of God, you are most certainly not equal in the eyes of the abbot. Learning to navigate this intricate hierarchy is just as crucial to your survival as learning to endure the cold or the back-breaking labor. At the absolute apex of this pyramid sits the abbot. He is the abbas, the spiritual father of the community, elected by the monks to rule for life. According to the rule of Saint Benedict, his authority is total and his every command is to be obeyed as if it came from Christ himself. When he enters a room, you stand. When he speaks, you listen. You learn to avoid his direct gaze, keeping your eyes humbly lowered. He is a remote, powerful figure, a living symbol of God's authority on earth. But you also learn that his power is a terrifying burden. The rule constantly reminds the abbot that on Judgment Day, he will be held personally accountable for the salvation of every single soul under his care, including yours. A lazy monk, a corrupt monk, a monk who loses his faith. Each is a stain on the abbot's own spiritual record. This thought alone is enough to make any sane man tremble. The abbot, however, cannot manage every detail of this bustling enterprise. He appoints officers, his spiritual lieutenants, who form the middle management of the monastery. You quickly learn who holds the real day-to-day power. The prior is the abbot's second-in-command, the deputy who often handles the nitty-gritty of discipline and daily operations. If the abbot is the distant, revered CEO, the prior is the often stressed and much less loved chief operating officer. Then there is the cellarer, a monk of immense practical importance. He is the quartermaster, in charge of all the abbey's material wealth. The food in the storehouses, the wine in the cellars, the tools, the seeds, the livestock. He is the one who assigns your daily labor. You learn very quickly that while the abbot holds the keys to heaven, the cellarer holds the keys to the pantry. It is wise to be very, very respectful of the cellarer. This division of labor points to a much deeper and more significant social divide within the community, a core historical fact of medieval monasticism. The community is split into two distinct classes of monk. First, there are the choir monks, like yourself. You are literate, you have taken the full vows, and your primary duty is the Opus Dei, the work of God, the performance of the 8 daily prayer services, chanted in Latin from the choir stalls of the church. Many choir monks came from noble or wealthy families, often given to the monastery as children in a practice known as oblation. Then, there are the conversi, the lay brothers. These men were often illiterate, from the peasant class, or joined the monastery later in life. Their vows were simpler, and they were exempt from the complex, time-consuming services in the choir. Their purpose was labor. They were the blacksmiths, the farmers, the shepherds, the permanent working class of this spiritual corporation. They often had their own separate, less comfortable dormitory and ate in a different part of the refectory. An invisible wall runs through the heart of the community, a constant reminder that even here, the world's social order has found a way to replicate itself. Your own place in the hierarchy is determined by a simple, brutal metric: the date you took your vows. You could be a wise, 50-year-old man, but if a 22-year-old took his vows the day before you, he is your senior. You must defer to him, walk behind him in processions, and yield to him in all things. This system is designed to systematically crush worldly pride, to make your previous status, wealth, or age utterly irrelevant. Still, you notice that the 19-year-old novice who is the third son of a powerful duke seems to be handled with a certain delicacy. Apparently, the vow of poverty is much easier for the community to admire when your family donates enough land to feed everyone for a decade. This brings up the quirky and often contentious matter of how the man at the top gets his job. The rule of Saint Benedict dictates that the abbot should be elected by the whole community, chosen for his holiness and wisdom. In theory, it is a pure spiritual meritocracy. In practice, you hear whispers that these elections can be intensely political. Factions form. Senior monks maneuver for influence. Sometimes, a powerful king or local bishop will try to impose his own candidate, seeking to control the abbey's vast wealth and land. The selection of the holiest man for the job can sometimes look suspiciously like a medieval backroom deal. This entire structure creates a complex social reality that you must learn to navigate. Historians and sociologists still argue about whether monasteries truly functioned as spiritual meritocracies where a humble peasant could rise to the highest office, or if they largely replicated the rigid social stratifications of the feudal world they had supposedly renounced. Was the abbot more often a truly devout man chosen by his brothers, or a well-connected aristocrat appointed to manage a valuable family asset? For you, the reality is on a much smaller scale. It's a silent social dance. You learn to read the subtle cues. A slight frown from the prior is a command for silence. A nod from the chant leader after a well-sung psalm is a victory that can make your whole day. It's like being a freshman in the strictest, most unforgiving high school in the history of the world. You figure out who the cool kids are, the scribes who get to work in the relative quiet of the scriptorium, who the jocks are, the brawny lay brothers who can lift an entire ox cart by themselves, and who the terrifying principal is, the abbot, who can assign you to latrine duty for a month if you so much as scuff your shoes too loudly. Your primary goal, you soon realize, is simply to become invisible, to do your work, say your prayers, and avoid attracting any kind of special attention, good or bad. In this rigid structure of command and obedience, you learn that your goal of staying invisible is a fool's errand. You are human. You are tired. You will eventually make a mistake. It is not a question of if, but when. And when you do, the community's response is swift, structured, and profoundly public. The mechanism for this is the daily meeting in the chapter house. After the morning prayers and a brief breakfast of bread, the entire community assembles in this stone-vaulted room. An appointed monk reads a chapter from the Rule of Saint Benedict. Then, the abbot holds court. In the business of the day is sin. The system of justice begins with voluntary confession. Monks are encouraged to stand before the community and publicly admit to the faults they committed the previous day. A moment of pride during a chant, a worldly thought during prayer, accidentally breaking the handle off a shovel. This is the easy way out, a self-imposed humiliation that is looked upon with favor. But if you keep silent about a fault, you risk the second method of correction, public accusation. Every monk is the guardian of his brother's soul, which means every monk is also a member of the surveillance committee. If a brother has seen you dozing during the night vigil or whispering in the cloister, it is his solemn duty to report you. One morning, it's your turn. You were so deeply exhausted that you failed to wake for the matins bell. You stumbled into the chapel a full 10 minutes late, a serious offense against the Opus Dei. You hoped no one noticed in the darkness. You were wrong. The prior, the custos ordinis or guardian of the order, whose job is to be the ever-vigilant eye of the law, saw everything. After the reading of the rule, he stands and his voice cuts through the silence. He names you and your transgression. A hot flush of shame crawls up your neck, and your face burns. All eyes are on you. As you are taught, you immediately fall to the floor, prostrating yourself full length on the cold stone, a silent admission of guilt. You lie there, face down, awaiting the abbot's judgment. For a minor fault like this, the punishment, or satisfaction, is designed to be humiliating rather than physically painful. This system of graduated penalties is a key historical fact of the rule, a kind of tariff for transgressions. The abbot sentences you to eat your meals for the next 2 days separated from the community. While your brothers sit at the tables in the refectory, you must take your portion of food and eat it sitting on the hard floor in the middle of the room. It's the medieval equivalent of being sent to the sad, wobbly desk in the corner of the principal's office. Everyone pretends not to notice you, which somehow makes the shame even more intense. The only upside is that you have a statistical advantage on any food they might accidentally drop. For more serious or repeated offenses, arguing with a superior, persistent laziness, or a violation of the vow of poverty, the penalties escalate dramatically. The next step is a form of excommunication. You are cut off from the community. You are barred from participating in the choir, your voice silenced during the sacred work. You must eat alone, work alone, and no monk is permitted to speak to you or even acknowledge your presence. You become a ghost, a non-person. The psychological weight of this enforced solitude in the midst of a crowd is immense, a powerful tool to break a rebellious spirit. For the gravest of sins, or for the monk who refuses to repent after all other measures have been tried, the rule allows for the final, terrifying correction, the discipline of the rod. They call it fraternal correction, which you find to be a remarkably gentle and understated term for getting whipped in front of all your colleagues. You witness it one day. A lay brother, accused of stealing wine from the cellar, is brought to the center of the chapter house. He is made to strip to the waist. 2 other monks hold his arms as the abbot delivers a cold, sermon-like judgment. Then, the prior takes up a scourge, a short whip with multiple leather tails, and the blows full. The sound is sickening, a wet, slapping noise that echoes off the stone walls. This is not a beating delivered in anger. It is a cold, ritualized, almost surgical procedure, seen as a painful but necessary medicine to save a soul infected with sin. Historians and cultural anthropologists still debate the primary purpose of these stark, public punishment rituals. Were they genuinely focused on the spiritual reformation and healing of the individual sinner? Or were they a form of judicial theater, a brutal performance designed primarily to reinforce the absolute authority of the abbot and to control the rest of the community through a powerful public display of fear and shame? After the punishment, whatever it may be, a remarkable thing happens. The moment the sentence is complete, the offender is brought back into the fold. He confesses his fault one last time, asks for the prayers of his brothers, and is officially forgiven. The matter is never to be spoken of again. There are no grudges. This powerful cycle of transgression, public punishment, and total forgiveness binds you ever tighter to the community. You live in a state of constant, low-level fear of putting a foot wrong, which you suspect is precisely the point. After watching the lay brother's ordeal, you make a quiet, personal vow: never, ever, under any circumstances, argue with the man who controls the wine cellar and has the abbot's full permission to authorize a flogging. It's a simple life lesson, really, and one you don't intend to forget. The gates of the abbey are intended to separate the sacred from the profane, the quiet world of God from the chaotic world of men. But the gates must sometimes open. Despite the vows of stability and the high stone walls, the outside world insists on making an appearance. Your interactions are rare and carefully managed, but these brief points of contact with pilgrims, merchants, and nobles serve as powerful, often jarring, reminders of the life you have renounced. The guiding principle for these encounters is Chapter 53 of the Rule of Saint Benedict, which states unequivocally, "Let all guests who arrive be received as Christ." Hospitality is not merely a courtesy, it is a sacred duty. A specific monk, the guest master, is tasked with this role. He is the abbey's official diplomat and welcoming committee, meeting visitors at the gate and escorting them to the guest house or hospitium. This guest house, you learn, is one of the most important functions of the monastery, serving as a vital and safe stopping point for travelers. It's a historical fact that monasteries were the medieval equivalent of the modern hotel chain, offering a network of reliable lodging in an age where secular inns were often dangerous and dirty. The most common visitors are pilgrims. They arrive on foot, their clothes dusty, their faces etched with the weariness of long miles. They may be coming to see a splinter of the true cross, or the finger bone of a martyr that your abbey is famous for housing. You see them in the church, their simple, fervent faith a powerful, almost embarrassing thing to witness. They weep before the altar, their prayers raw and desperate. In their eyes, you see a reflection of the uncomplicated piety you once sought, and it makes your own struggles with aesthesia and doubt feel petty and intellectual. You are supposed to be the professional man of God, yet their faith seems, in many ways, purer than your own. Then there are the merchants. The monastery, for all its self-sufficiency, still needs things it cannot produce: salt for preserving food, iron for the blacksmith, fine vellum for the most important manuscripts. Merchants arrive with laden mules and carts, bringing not only goods but also news and gossip from the towns. They're a necessary evil. Their loud, confident voices, their talk of prices and politics, and their worldly cynicism feel like a contamination of the sacred quiet. They are a brief, pungent whiff of the world of commerce you left behind, and you are relieved when their business is concluded and they depart. The most disruptive arrivals are those of the nobility. When a local lord, a bishop, or even a member of the royal court decides to stay at the abbey, the entire community shifts into a different gear. It becomes a grand performance of piety and power. The best tapestries are hung, the altar is dressed in its finest cloths, and the food served in the abbot's private dining hall is a world away from your silent, meatless meal in the refectory. Suddenly, the no-meat rule seems to have developed a great deal of exception clauses and fine print, and the wine that flows is certainly not the watered-down stuff you're used to. It's amazing how Christ-like a guest can appear when he owns half the surrounding county and has a small army at his back. As a common choir monk, you observe all this from a distance. You are not to speak to the guests unless directly ordered to. You see them, flashes of color and sound against the monochrome silence of your life. The sight of a noble lady's brightly colored silk gown, the sound of her children laughing as they chase each other in the guesthouse courtyard, the jingle of a knight's spurs on the stone floor, each detail is a sensory shock. It can trigger a sudden, sharp wave of nostalgia for a world you no longer belong to, a potent reminder of all the sights, sounds, and experiences you have sacrificed. Sometimes, a visitor never leaves. This brings us to a quirky medieval arrangement known as the carety. A wealthy but aging noble, or a rich merchant's widow with no heirs, could essentially purchase a retirement plan from the monastery. In exchange for a massive donation of land or gold, the abbey would grant them a carety, guaranteeing them a private room, daily meals, and care for the rest of their natural life. You have one such resident, a perpetually grumpy old countess who bought her place here years ago. She complains about the drafts, thinks the chanting is too loud, and is constantly trying to convince the cellarer that her delicate constitution requires spiced cakes and imported wine. She is, for all intents and purposes, the monastery's first ever Karen, and you get the distinct impression that even the abbot is a little terrified of her. These carefully managed interactions make you wonder about the true nature of your separation from the world. Historians still debate how impermeable the cloister walls really were. Were monasteries truly otherworldly refuges, islands of peace in a sea of chaos, as their own chronicles and hagiographies claim? Or were they, in fact, deeply enmeshed in the secular world, major landowners, political players, and economic engines, inextricably linked to the very power structures they claim to renounce? Eventually, the visit ends. The noble entourage, with all its noise and finery, rides away. The merchant concludes his business. The pilgrims, having received their blessing, continue on their journey. A profound, almost deafening quiet settles back over the abbey. The routine reasserts its comforting, monotonous rhythm. The intrusion is over. It leaves you feeling unsettled, but also strangely affirmed in your choice. The brief chaos of the encounter makes the silence that follows feel deeper, richer, and more precious. After the guests leave, it feels like your loud relatives have finally gone home after a long holiday visit. The good silverware is locked away, and it's back to the familiar bean stew for dinner. And a small, secret part of you is deeply, deeply glad. The memory of the outside world fades, and the deep, resonant silence of the abbey reclaims you. What rushes in to fill the void is the routine, and the very bones of that routine, the skeleton that gives your entire existence its shape, is the divine office. Your life is governed not by the sun or the seasons, but by the relentless, beautiful, and sometimes maddening ringing of the chapel bell. It is the call to the Opus Dei, the work of God. The rule of Saint Benedict is explicit on this point. Therefore, let nothing be preferred to the work of God. Not labor, not study, not even sleep. Your primary purpose here is to be a professional prayer, a living, breathing sacrifice of praise offered up on behalf of a fallen world. This work of God is a cycle of 8 prayer services that punctuates the day and night. It is a historical fact that this liturgy of the hours provides the unyielding structure for Benedictine life. You have experienced them in pieces, the sleepy struggle of matins, the midday pause of sext, but now you feel the full, crushing rhythm of the complete cycle every single day. It begins in the profound darkness around 2 in the morning with Matins, the night watch. This is the longest, most challenging office, a 2-hour marathon of psalms and readings that you must endure while your body is screaming for sleep. This is followed at first light by lauds, an office of praise, timed to coincide with the rising of the sun. The mood is lighter, more hopeful, as you greet the new day with canticles of joy. After lauds, you might have a small piece of bread before the day's work begins, which is soon interrupted by prime, the first hour, around 6 a.m., a brief prayer to consecrate the morning's labor. Then come the 3 little hours, which act as spiritual punctuation marks in your workday. Terce at the 3rd hour, around 9, sext at the 6th hour, high noon, and none at the 9th hour, around 3 in the afternoon. Each time the bell rings, you drop your tools, wash your hands, and process to the church for a short service of psalms. They are spiritual anchors, designed to pull your mind away from your worldly tasks, weeding, smithing, copying, and recenter it on God. As the sun begins to sink and the sky turns orange and purple, the bell calls you to Vespers. This is the second major service of the day, the evening prayer. As candles are lit against the growing dark, the atmosphere in the chapel becomes solemn and beautiful. This service, which always includes the great canticle of Mary, the Magnificat, has a feeling of gentle, weary gratitude for the day that has passed. Finally, after the sparse evening meal and a period of quiet reading, comes Compline. This is the final prayer, the good night to God. It is short, intimate, and asks for a peaceful night and protection from the demonic terrors that prowl the darkness. After Compline, the great silence falls, not to be broken until the next day. The heart of every one of these services is the Book of Psalms. You chant your way through all 150 of them every single week. You become intimately familiar with their emotional landscape, from the heights of praise in Psalm 150 to the depths of despair in Psalm 88. You know them so well you could chant them in your sleep, and frequently, during matins, you do. You even have a personal favorite, Psalm 137, the one about weeping by the waters of Babylon. Feels particularly appropriate on days when you're feeling gloomy and the bean stew was thinner than usual. The prayer is not just vocal, it is physical. The chanting is done antiphonally, a quirky and beautiful technique where the monks are divided into 2 choirs on opposite sides of the chapel. One side sings a verse of a psalm, and the other side sings the next verse back. It creates a flowing, conversational wave of sound that fills the church. Sometimes, if the abbot is distracted, a subtle rivalry can develop. One side will boom out a verse with particular force, and the other will respond with even greater volume. It's the medieval version of a rap battle, but with more Gregorian chant and significantly less interesting insults. After years of this relentless cycle, the great spiritual challenge becomes one of familiarity. How do you keep the words from becoming a meaningless drone? How do you pray the Psalms instead of merely reciting them? As you stand in the choir, your voice automatically forming the ancient Latin words, your mind can be miles away. You're supposed to be meditating on God's eternal majesty, but you're actually thinking about the draft coming from the window, the persistent ache in your lower back, or the fact that Brother Philip seems to be slightly off-key again. Maintaining focus is a constant, humbling battle. Liturgical historians still debate how much the monastic office evolved over the centuries. Was the elaborate, musically complex service you now perform a faithful continuation of the simple practice described in the 6th century rule of Saint Benedict? Or had it become, over time, a far more intricate and time-consuming performance, a piece of high art that was beautiful, yet perhaps spiritually removed from the raw, practical devotion Benedict had first envisioned? For you, these questions are academic. The divine office is simply the rhythm of your life, the very air you breathe. It is the one great work that unites the entire community, from the abbot to the newest novice. It rewires your whole perception of time. You don't think in terms of hours or minutes. You think in terms of prayers. Your internal clock is set to the bells. If your stomach is rumbling and the shadows are long, it must be nearly time for Vespers. If you're chanting Psalm 95, "O come, let us sing unto the Lord," you know the long night watch of Matins has just begun. It's a very effective, if slightly all-consuming, system. This endless river of prayer is what you have dedicated your life to, and you are but one small voice in its eternal, flowing current. While your life is overwhelmingly defined by the rhythmic cycle of prayer and the dull ache of physical labor, it is not entirely devoid of thought. The rule of Saint Benedict, in its wisdom, prescribes not just work and prayer, but also a daily period for sacred reading, the Lectio Divina. It is in these quiet, focused moments that you engage in the other great purpose of your community, the preservation and contemplation of knowledge. This is the intellectual pursuit that serves as a small, defiant flicker of light in what often feels like a very dark age. Lectio Divina is not reading as you once knew it. It's not for entertainment or even for gathering information. It is a slow, prayerful, and deeply personal encounter with a sacred text. You take a heavy, leather-bound volume, perhaps a book of the Gospels or a collection of letters by Saint Jerome, and find a quiet spot in the cloister walk. The practice has 4 distinct steps. First is Lectio, the slow reading of a short passage, over and over, until the words are familiar. Next comes Meditatio, meditation, where you ponder the meaning of the passage, chewing on it as a cow chews its cud. This leads to Oratio, prayer, where you speak to God about what you have read, your heart responding to the text. Finally, if you are blessed, you may arrive at Contemplatio, a silent, wordless resting in the presence of God, the fruit of your reading. This practice is fueled by the monastery's library, which is, in fact, the intellectual heart of Western Europe. It is a historical fact that before the rise of the great universities in the 12th and 13th centuries, monasteries like yours were the primary centers of learning and the sole repositories of books on the continent. The Armarius, the librarian, guards these treasures with his life. The collection contains the Holy Scriptures, of course, and endless commentaries by the great church fathers, Augustine, Ambrose, Gregory the Great. But it might also hold copies of pagan Roman authors like Virgil or Cicero, preserved for their beautiful Latin prose, as well as practical texts on medicine or agriculture. This accumulated wisdom is not static. While formal, open debate is rare and can be seen as a form of pride, Intense theological discussions are a part of the abbey's intellectual life. You might overhear two of the older, more learned monks engaged in a quiet discussion in the cloister garden about the precise nature of the Trinity or the mechanics of transubstantiation. You listen, catching snippets of Latin. Soon, their voices get a little louder, their gestures more emphatic, their faces flushed with passion. It's the monastic version of a heated debate thread on the internet. Only the topic is the procession of the Holy Spirit, not the latest celebrity gossip. The monks don't just read the books, they talk back to them. This provides a wonderfully quirky and humanizing glimpse into the mind of the medieval scholar, the practice of adding a gloss. A gloss is a note scribbled in the margin or between the lines of a text. It might be a scholarly clarification or a translation of a difficult word. But sometimes, it's a personal, candid complaint. On the page of one precious manuscript in your library, an anonymous Irish monk, struggling with his materials hundreds of years ago, scrawled a note in his native Gaelic. It is cold today. The ink is thin. The vellum is of poor quality. I am weary. Reading those words, you feel a profound connection, a shared moment of misery across the centuries. You, too, are often weary. You, too, have struggled with bad ink. Your work in the scriptorium, which you once saw as a mind-numbing, back-breaking chore, now takes on a new, deeper meaning. You are not just a copyist. You are a guardian, a vital link in a fragile chain of knowledge stretching back to antiquity. You are preserving these words against the ravages of time, fire, war, and ignorance. One day, you spend an entire month carefully copying a work by a classical Roman author who complains at length about the noise, crowds, and stress of city life. You, sitting in a freezing, silent room where the most exciting event of the week was a new type of bean in the pottage, find it very difficult to sympathize. You are sorely tempted to add your own gloss in the margin. You think you have it bad? Try the winter ale here. Of course, the intellectual world of the monastery is both deep and incredibly narrow. Historians and philosophers still debate the selectivity of this great preservation project. While monks are rightly celebrated for saving the classics, how much did they filter or ignore? Did they choose not to copy scientific or philosophical works that seem to contradict church doctrine, effectively curating the past to fit their own theological worldview, and in doing so, shaping the intellectual landscape of Europe for 1,000 years? As a common monk, your own intellectual world is similarly circumscribed. The abbot determines which books you may read. The most controversial or challenging texts are kept under lock and key, reserved only for the most trusted scholars. Still, in a world where literacy is the exception rather than the rule, you are a privileged man. In the quiet of the cloister, with a heavy book in your lap, or in the focused silence of the scriptorium, with a quill in your hand, you are participating in a grand, sacred project. The abbot delivers a long sermon in the chapter house on the sinfulness of pride. You listen with rapt attention, feeling appropriately humble. But then you remember that yesterday in the scriptorium, you correctly spelled the notoriously difficult word consubstantialis 3 times in a row without even checking the exemplar. A little wave of pure, unadulterated pride washes over you. You immediately feel guilty, which makes you feel humble, which then makes you proud of your newfound humility. It is a vicious, exhausting, and very intellectual cycle. The years pass, marked not by birthdays or holidays, but by the turning of the liturgical calendar and the slow, almost imperceptible aging of the brothers around you. The routines that were once a conscious effort have become second nature, as ingrained as breathing. The physical hardships have been blunted by familiarity. But as these external struggles recede, a deeper, more insidious challenge takes their place. You came to the monastery seeking communion with God in the sacred silence. You did not realize that in this profound quiet, you would also find a solitude so complete, so heavy, that it threatens to crush your very soul. It is the central paradox of your existence. You are never, ever physically alone. From the moment you wake in the packed dormitory to the moment you fall asleep, you are surrounded by your brothers. You work alongside them, you pray beside them, you eat in the same hall. Yet, you are profoundly lonely. The rule of silence, designed to foster an atmosphere of prayer, also builds invisible walls between you and the men you live with. Meaningful conversation is a rarity, a sanctioned event. The small, easy camaraderie of shared words, of jokes and idle chatter that oils the gears of human relationships in the outside world, is absent here. You are a solitary man performing his life's work in the middle of a crowd. You become acutely aware of the emotional texture missing from your life. The simple, unvowed lay brothers, the conversee, who spend their days in the fields and workshops, are permitted more freedom in their speech. You see them sharing a joke as they mend a fence, and you feel a sharp, unexpected pang of envy for their easy fellowship. You have sacrificed the bonds of family, the comfort of a wife, the joy of children. These are no longer just temptations to be fought off. They have become gaping absences, emotional voids in the fabric of your being. Your relationships are with God, with long-dead saints, and with the words in ancient books. You become surprisingly close friends with a particular spider that has built an intricate web in the corner of your choir stall. You've named him Bartholomew. He's an excellent listener, never criticizes your chanting, and seems to share your general dismay when it's cabbage stew for supper again. Bartholomew is currently your best and only friend. The silence forces you to live almost entirely inside your own head, and you discover that your mind is not always a peaceful sanctuary. It can be a prison. With no external distractions, old memories and regrets begin to circle endlessly, like vultures. A harsh word your father spoke to you 20 years ago, the face of a girl from your village you once thought you might marry, a foolish, youthful mistake you thought you'd long forgotten. They all return with startling, painful clarity. The mind, turned inward, does not always find God. Sometimes, it just finds the unfiltered, unmedicated chaos of itself. You see the appeal of the most extreme forms of your lifestyle. It's a historical fact that for many devout people in your era, the communal life of the monastery was not solitary enough. They became anchorites or hermits. An anchorite would be literally walled into a small stone cell attached to a church, with only a small window through which to receive food and view the altar. They would never leave that tiny room until they died. This was seen by many as the absolute pinnacle of holiness. You look at the walls of your own abbey and sometimes, in your darkest moments, you understand the impulse. Other times, the thought fills you with a claustrophobic terror. From a modern perspective, the line between piety and pathology here seems terrifyingly thin. Psychologists and historians still debate the mental health of cloistered individuals in this period. Was the monastic life a healthy, structured environment that provided peace and purpose for introspective souls? Or did it inadvertently create the perfect conditions for what we would now diagnose as clinical depression, severe anxiety, and obsessive-compulsive disorders, all of which were interpreted through the only available framework, a religious one of spiritual trials and demonic assaults? You started having long, detailed conversations with the saints you're reading about. Saint Anthony, who was famously tempted by demons in the desert, gives you excellent, if slightly unhinged, advice on dealing with your own temptations. You're pretty sure this is a sign of either impending sainthood or a complete mental collapse. Frankly, you're betting on the collapse. Adding to the pressure is the specific sin of murmuratio, or grumbling. The rule of Saint Benedict is incredibly strict about this. Complaining about your work, sighing with discontent over the food, or even showing your unhappiness through sullen body language is a serious fault. This quirky prohibition means you cannot even vent your frustrations. All the loneliness, all the despair, must be kept inside, offered up to God in silence. It's a pressure cooker for the soul. This can all build to the ultimate crisis of faith. You have given up everything for this life, for God. But in the depths of the silence, you sometimes feel with a terrifying certainty that no one is listening. Your prayers feel like stones dropped down a bottomless well. The routine becomes a hollow, meaningless pantomime. This is the true dark night of the soul. The abbot tells you this is a test from God, meant to purify your faith. To you, it feels more like God has put you on celestial hold and the background music is just endless, off-key Gregorian chant. You're starting to suspect he's forgotten your extension number. How do you survive? You cling to the structure. The routine is your life raft in the sea of desolation. You get up. You chant the prayers that feel like ash in your mouth. You go to the fields. You eat the bread that tastes like dust. You put one foot in front of the other. And sometimes, in the chapel, you look across the choir at the face of an older monk and see the same profound, bone-deep weariness in his eyes. He meets your gaze for a fleeting second, and in that unspoken, shared moment of struggle, you feel a flicker of communion. You are not alone in your loneliness. And for today, that is enough. The dark night of the soul is not a permanent state. It is a season, and eventually, slowly, it begins to recede. You survive it by clinging to the scaffolding of your life, the routine, the prayers, the work. But you do not emerge unchanged. The simple, uncritical faith you arrived with is gone forever, replaced by something more complex, more fragile, and far more troubled. Having stared into the abyss of your own solitude, you now look upon the world and the church with new, skeptical eyes. You begin to see the cracks not just in yourself, but in the very edifice of your religion. News from the world outside filters into the cloister, brought by travelers and merchants. It is news of a spiritual sickness, a poison that terrifies your abbot. Heresy. You hear tales of the Cathars in the south of France, a powerful and popular movement that has been condemned by the Pope. This is a major historical event, the rise of a serious theological rival to the Catholic Church. The abbot, in his chapter talks, paints them as agents of Satan. You learn of their beliefs, that the physical world was created not by God, but by an evil deity. They believe the human soul is a divine spark trapped in the prison of the flesh. They reject the sacraments, the priesthood, and the entire structure of the church, which they see as a corrupt, worldly institution. This is terrifying to you, a direct assault on everything you have dedicated your life to. And yet, a small, treacherous part of you finds their ideas horribly seductive. Their belief that the body and the material world are a corrupt prison resonates with your own daily battles against temptation. Their rejection of worldly wealth and power echoes your own vow of poverty. Their ideas seem to spring from the very same despair and disillusionment you have felt in your own dark night. You know it is a damnable heresy, but it is a heresy that seems to understand your own pain. This newfound skepticism turns inward, and you begin to question the practices within your own walls. Your gaze falls upon the abbey's most treasured possession, its holy relic. It is the knucklebone of St. Fiacre, the patron saint of gardeners, housed in a magnificent reliquary of gold and polished gemstones. Pilgrims travel for hundreds of miles and donate precious coins to pray before it. The relic is the source of your abbey's fame and a significant portion of its income. For years, you have bowed before it without a second thought. Now, you look at the small, brown piece of bone behind the rock crystal and a terrible question forms in your mind. How do we actually know it's his? Your abbey's most prized possession is the supposed collarbone of St. Petronilla. It rests on a velvet cushion inside a gilded box. Pilgrims weep before it. You have to admit, it's a very respectable-looking collarbone, as far as desiccated human remains go. But lately, as you kneel before it, a single, blasphemous thought keeps repeating itself. That's just a bone. The spiritual significance you are supposed to feel is completely absent, replaced by a cold, clinical curiosity. What if it's a pig's bone? What if it was just dug up from an old grave? Does the fervent faith of the pilgrims make it holy, regardless of its origin? You've heard the tales of the relic trade. This brings to mind the quirky, and frankly bizarre, competition between churches. You know that multiple abbeys across Europe claim to possess the holy prepuce, the foreskin of Christ from his circumcision. The very idea of a bidding war over such an object makes your head spin. You hear a rumor from a traveling merchant that a monastery in the north claims to have a feather from the wing of the Archangel Gabriel. The competition is getting stiff. You start thinking your abbey needs to up its relic game. Maybe if you dig around in the garden long enough, you could find a petrified olive pit from the Garden of Gethsemane. This forces you to confront a difficult question. Historians and theologians will one day debate the primary role of the relic cult in the Middle Ages. Was it a genuine and powerful expression of popular piety, a way for ordinary people to make the divine tangible and to feel a physical connection to the sacred? Or was it, at its worst, a cynical and exploitative enterprise driven by ecclesiastical greed, using fabricated objects and exaggerated claims to generate revenue and control a superstitious populace? You are caught in the middle of this debate, centuries before it will be formally articulated. Part of you still believes. The soaring beauty of the chant, the profound wisdom in the writings of the fathers, the comforting solidity of the sacraments, this is the world that saved you. But another part of you, the part forged in the lonely silence, is now a confirmed skeptic. You see the potential for fraud everywhere. You see the pride and ambition of the abbot, the petty jealousies of your brothers, the vast gap between the perfect, seamless ideal of the church and the messy, all too human reality. You keep these thoughts locked away, of course. To voice them would be to confess your own heresy. So you perform the role required of you. You continue to chant the prayers against the heretics. You bow your head to the knucklebone of St. Fiacre. You trace the sign of the cross on your chest at the proper times. But inside, a quiet, seismic shift has occurred. Your faith is no longer a solid rock upon which you stand, but a thin, frayed tightrope you must walk over a terrifying abyss every single day. During a sermon on the unshakable certainty of the faith, you start mentally cataloging your doubts. By the end, the list is so long you think it could be its own manuscript. You decide to title it, "The Gospel According to Your Own Anxious Mind," and then immediately pray for forgiveness for the thought. The seasons turn, and then, without you fully noticing how, the seasons turn into decades. The face that stares back at you from a polished metal plate or a still puddle in the cloister is a stranger's, a hollow-cheeked, wrinkled old man with watery eyes and thin, white hair fringing his tonsure. The fiery spiritual crises of your youth, the intense battles with temptation and the sharp agony of doubt, have cooled into a low, smoldering ember. They have been replaced by a more immediate and relentless struggle, the simple, grinding reality of a body that is beginning to fail. Your life has been hard, and your body keeps the score. A deep, persistent ache has settled into your joints, a gift from the perpetual, damp cold of the stone dormitory. Kneeling for long prayers in the chapel is a form of low-grade torture. Rising again is a slow, creaking ordeal that requires you to push off from the pew in front of you. Your eyesight, once sharp enough to copy the tiniest script, is now clouded and weak, the words in your prayer book a blurry dance. Years of labor and hunching over desks have fused your spine into a permanent, gentle curve. You have, you realize, become one of the old men you once saw as a novice, shuffling slowly along the cloister walk. There is, however, no retirement in the house of God. You are a monk until you die, and you are expected to work for the community until you can no longer stand. The rule, in its wisdom, allows the abbot to show consideration for the elderly. You are no longer sent to the fields for the harvest or assigned to the forge. Your duties become lighter, more sedentary. Your new job is shelling peas in the scullery, a task you can do while seated. It's a promotion, of a sort, from mucking out the stables 40 years ago, but it's just as endless. You have shelled so many peas you see their little green forms when you close your eyes. You have come to the profound theological conclusion that the road to salvation is paved with an infinite number of legumes. As one of the seniors, you hold a place of respect in the community's hierarchy. Your seniority, based on the day you took your vows decades ago, means that young novices must stand when you enter a room and defer to you in processions. They look at you with a mixture of awe and pity, like you're a walking relic, slightly less interesting than the saint's collarbone but definitely older. They sometimes ask you what it was like in the old days. You are tempted to tell them you remember when the Dead Sea was just feeling a bit under the weather, but you hold your tongue. For all their deference, you also feel a sense of your own growing irrelevance. The community is run by younger, stronger men. The world is changing outside the walls, and you are a relic of a bygone era. You are a survivor. Given the harshness of the life, it is a historical fact that many of your brothers did not live to see old age. Disease, accidents, and the simple wearing down of the body claim them. You have seen the friends of your youth, the men you entered the novitiate with, pass away one by one. Their names are recorded in the abbey's necrology, the obit book, a calendar containing the names of the dead. Every year, on the anniversary of a brother's death, his name is read aloud in the chapter house so the community can pray for his soul. You listen as the names are read, a roll call of ghosts, and you know that one day, your own name will be added to that list. Historians and archaeologists still debate the quality of life for elderly monks. Does the evidence of severe arthritis, bone fractures, and worn-out joints found in monastic cemeteries point to a life of unrelenting hardship and neglect to the very end? Or did the communal structure, with its infirmary and system of lighter duties, provide a form of social security and palliative care that was almost entirely absent in the violent, precarious world outside the walls. From your perspective, it feels like both. You are cared for, but you are also expected to endure. You spend more and more time in the infirmary, not for dramatic fevers, but for the chronic complaints of age. The infirmarian, a young man who wasn't even born when you took your vows, gives you a pungent herbal rub for your aching back and allows you an extra ration of wine for its medicinal properties. Here, you watch the great cycle of life continue. You see young novices brought in, delirious with the same fevers you once suffered, and you see old monks like yourself who have been brought here for the last time, their journey's end approaching. Your final years become the ultimate test of your vows, a long, slow testament to endurance. When your knees scream in protest as you kneel, the act of kneeling itself becomes your prayer. When your mind wanders during the psalms, the simple act of remaining in the choir stall is your offering. The abbot, perhaps seeing that shelling peas is not the most edifying work, gives you a new, important job, chasing the pigeons away from the newly planted seeds in the herb garden. It is a task that requires very little movement, but allows for a great deal of silent grumbling, so it suits your temperament perfectly. You have developed a personal and deeply spiritual feud with one particularly brazen pigeon you've named Thomas. Outwitting Thomas is now the primary focus of your waking life. This, you think, is what monasticism is in the end. Not ecstatic visions or profound theological insights, but the quiet, stubborn, day-by-day refusal to give up. The day comes when your feud with the pigeons is over. You do not rise from your pallet in the infirmary. The last of your strength has finally seeped away, not in a fever or a dramatic illness, but in the slow, quiet wearing down of the years. Your breath is a shallow whisper. Your world has shrunk to the confines of this small bed, the stone ceiling above you, and the face of the infirmarian as he leans in to offer you a sip of water. The end is not a surprise, it is an arrival. Your approaching death is not treated as a medical failure, but as the final and most important spiritual event of your life. The monastery now mobilizes around you, not to save your body, in which they have no hope, but to safeguard the passage of your soul. This is the ars moriendi, the art of dying, and it is a historical fact that monks were the great masters of this solemn craft. The process is not one of panicked grief, but of profound, ancient ritual. The abbot is summoned. Your brothers, the men you have lived beside for more than 60 years, fall silently into the infirmary and gather around your bed. Their familiar faces, now old and wrinkled themselves, are a blur. Their voices, which you have heard chanting the psalms every day for a lifetime, begin a low, murmuring recitation of the prayers for the dying. You make your final confession to the abbot, your voice a dry rasp. You try to recall your greatest sins. All you can summon is the memory of the time you envied Brother Mark's new sandals, the intense satisfaction you felt when a rival scribe made a glaring error, and your unchristian hatred for that pigeon, Thomas. The abbot listens with grave patience, absolves you of your comically petty life of sin, and anoints your forehead with holy oil. Then comes the last rites. You receive the viaticum, the final communion, a tiny piece of the consecrated host placed on your tongue. It is your food for the great journey ahead. Following a very old tradition, a truly quirky and humbling final act, the brothers gently lift your frail body from the relative comfort of the bed and lay you upon a rough sackcloth that has been spread on the cold stone floor and sprinkled with ashes. It is the ultimate gesture of penance and humility, a stark reminder that you are made from dust, and to dust you shall return. Lying there, you can feel the chill of the stone through the thin cloth, one last time. As you lie on the floor, surrounded by the chanting of your community, a strange peace descends. The chronic pain in your joints fades to a distant echo. The great intellectual doubts and spiritual anxieties that once tormented you seem like the foolish, passionate arguments of a young man you barely remember. It all seems so simple now. You lived, you struggled, you endured, and now you are going home. Someone holds a crucifix to your lips for you to kiss. For a brief, delirious moment, your mind, so conditioned by the routines of the body, wonders if this is some new kind of holy biscuit. You wisely decide against trying to take a bite. The medieval world was saturated with the idea of memento mori. Remember, you must die. Historians still debate the psychological impact of this. Did this constant focus on death and decay foster a morbid, fear-based culture? Or did it provide a powerful framework that allowed people to face their own mortality with a sense of order, purpose, and profound hope that is often absent in a world that prefers not to think about it at all? For you, lying on the ashes, there is no fear. There is only a quiet, weary anticipation. You have been preparing for this single moment your entire adult life. Every pre-dawn prayer, every drop of sweat in the fields, every painstakingly copied letter, every lonely moment, it was all a rehearsal for this. It is the propositum, the final goal, the ultimate and most complete surrender of your will to God's. The final act of obedience. The faces of your brothers begin to blur. The chanting softens, becoming a resonant, hypnotic hum that seems to come from inside your own chest. The world of cold stone, itchy wool, and aching bones is receding. You have reached the end of the rule. You have fought the good fight. You have finished the race. You have kept the faith. And now, all that is left to do is let go. The light from the infirmary window seems to dim, though the sun is still high. The sound of the chanting is no longer a collection of distinct voices, but a single, soft, continuous wave of sound that cradles you. The feeling of the rough sackcloth beneath you and the faint, sweet scent of beeswax and incense are the last threads connecting you to the world of the senses. You feel the presence of the men who have been your family, their collective prayer a warm and steady pressure, guiding you forward. There is no struggle left in you, no final burst of panic, only a deep and profound weariness, a sense of a great and lifelong labor finally reaching its conclusion. The tight knot of self that you have carried for 80 long years, the one you fought and wrestled with in the silence, finally begins to loosen and unwind. There is no grand vision, no angelic choir, only a gentle and inexorable fading into a vast, welcoming quiet. It is the ultimate release, the final, grateful surrender. The journey is over, and you can finally rest. And now, you too can rest. The cold stone floor of the Abbey is a world away from the familiar comfort of your own bed. The hardships and the endless prayers have faded back into the mist of history, leaving only a gentle quiet in their place. The story is over, and you are safe. There are no bells to wake you, no duties to perform. There is only the soft darkness, the gentle weight of your own blankets, and the steady, easy rhythm of your own breathing. Let the silence of the cloister become the peace of your room. Let the deep quiet of the night carry you into an even deeper, more restful sleep.